Hi, welcome to Chapter 10, Wonder On. Frankie and Maya went into the school library the next day and said good morning to Miss Appleton. Good morning, girls, Miss Appleton said. How are you? How are two of my favorite wanderers? Awesome, Maya said. Splendiforous, Frankie agreed. She handed Miss Appleton the index card she had worked on the evening before. Aunt Nichelle had read it over and help her fix the spelling mistakes, but all the ideas had been Frankie's. Another I wonder solved, Miss Appleton asked. Not exactly, Frankie said. Miss Appleton looked at the card. She read it aloud. Are leprechauns real? That is a tough question to find out. I created a scientific experiment. My goal was to see if I could catch a leprechaun. If I did, then obviously we would know that leprechauns do exist. If I didn't, I thought that meant we would know that they didn't exist. But leprechauns aren't that simple. We didn't catch a leprechaun, and at first I thought that meant I'd prove that leprechauns didn't exist. But then Maya pointed out that maybe it just meant that no leprechauns had come to the trap. I thought my experiment was a failure. Then I realized that my research was just a starting point. It raised some good questions like, what is the best bait for leprechauns? And do leprechauns hibernate? Sometimes experiments answer questions. Sometimes they just raise more questions. At first, that was frustrating to me. Now, I hope that if anyone else wonders about leprechauns, they will use my experiments to help them ask questions and find answers. Miss Appleton lowered the card and looked at Frankie. Frankie, I am very impressed. I know you like to have answers to your question. I do, Frankie said, but sometimes it's nice to wonder. Isn't it? Isn't it? Miss Appleton said. Maya smiled. Wonder on, Miss Appleton, she said. Wonder on, girls, Miss Appleton replied. Frankie and Maya hooked elbows and walked down the hallway toward Mrs. Cupid's room. I've been thinking about your opus problem, Frankie said. My opus problem, Maya replied. With the hoot, leprechauns are mysterious. But we know a lot about Opus. He likes to go into boxes and onto the couch, right? That's true, Maya agreed. Maybe he likes squares better than round things, Frankie said. Or maybe a different color hoop. Or one that smells like bacon. Or, oh, Frankie, Maya said. You never stop, do you? Nope, Frankie said. Good, Maya told her, because I've got a lot of things I wonder about. Frankie smiled. Whatever Maya wondered about, Frankie was sure she could find a way to investigate. Maybe she wouldn't find all the answers, but she could certainly get the ball rolling. And here is her design process. First, you have to identify the problem. Then you brainstorm. Then you design. Then you test and retest and share. And this is Maya's design. First in the story, Frankie learns that engineers try to guess how their designs might fail. Testing and retesting is part of the design process, and failure testing extends that idea to imagine failures that might happen, even if they don't show up in the testing. Frankie makes a list of all the ways her trap could fail and then tries to solve each of those problems. For example, adding layers of plastic and sand to the trap would make it harder for a leprechaun to get out. She also adds the fail-safe of glitter so that even if, against all odds, her trap fails, she will have evidence of a leprechaun having been there. This is what we mean by failure testing. This step is important because testing may not expose all of the faults in an invention. Frankie's Aunt Nichelle is working on a project for a garden in space. Going to space costs a lot of money. So she can't run all experiments up in space. She needs to be able to do some of them on the ground. By anticipating failure, she is finding ways to make her design as good as possible before sending it into orbit. Next, what could possibly go wrong? In this story, Frankie has to think about all the ways her leprechaun trap might not work. She also does some research about leprechauns, both in books and through her experiments with the trap. As her Aunt Nichelle tells her, sometimes the first person to investigate a problem doesn't solve it. That person sets a foundation for others to build upon. So, you guessed it. Now it's your turn to build a leprechaun trap. First, think of all the things you know about leprechauns. Next, add all the things that Frankie learned. Then go to the library and see if you can find out more information about leprechauns. With this information in mind, design and build your leprechaun trap. Now it's a time for the fun part, failure. Try to think of all the ways your trap could fail. Ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong? Make a list. Then ask yourself, how could I stop that failure from happening? You could use a table like this. When your trap is done, put it out somewhere in your home and see what you can catch. Keep careful records. Together, we may be able to prove once and for all whether leprechauns exist. And thank you to the terrific team at Aladdin who helped to bring Frankie Sparks into the world, especially the editor, Allison Heller, copy editor, Karen Sherman, cover designer, Laura Lynn, the Xena, and interior designers like Mike Rosenmilla and Tierra Lengardi, thank you, Nada, etc., etc. So I'm not going to read all the acknowledgments, but maybe you can check out this book from your library. Check out Frankie Sparks, the third great inventor. Very interesting.